Even though there are still quite a few Marvel movies to look forward to, the story of the original Avengers has come to a close. With 22 movies released in 11 years, figuring out what order to watch them all in for your marathon can be overwhelming. Sure, there's the release order, but is that really still the best? When they were first being released, the order was designed to make sure the audience knew what they needed to when they needed to, and not a moment sooner. Now, though, we have the whole picture. Rather than just trying to put puzzle pieces together or coming up with theories about how the MCU works,
Bucky? Who the hell is Bucky?
we can watch as everything unfolds. It would be like you're a citizen of the MCU, minus all the destruction of your property and the incredibly high insurance rates everyone has to have. But what is the chronological order? And how can you stick to it? The first wave of movies to watch is basically a reorder of Phase 1, just with one extra movie joining the list. Start with Captain America: The First Avenger and follow your marathon up with Captain Marvel, Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, and finally, The Avengers. Even though Captain Marvel was originally released in 2019, the events of the movie occur in 1995, making it the second movie in the timeline. Watching it early on not only explains the origins of the Avengers unit and Nick Fury's part in its creation, but it also sets up the wider stage that the franchise eventually takes on. After all, when people were going to see Iron Man or the Incredible Hulk for the first time, the wider galaxy wasn't as important. Instead, it was meant to be a twist that aliens were involved. Now though, with one of the movies being called Guardians of the Galaxy and everyone knowing how far the MCU goes, there's no reason to hide its origins. Instead, Captain Marvel can be used to set up how deep an impact the Tesseract will have while giving viewers a taste of what's to come. Besides the addition of Captain Marvel, the rest of the Phase 1 movies are mostly in the same order they were released, with almost every movie ending with a post-credit scene that foreshadows which title will be dropped next. It would be hard to watch them in any other order. If Thor doesn't come after Iron Man 2, the end credit scene where Mjolnir is found would feel out of place. It would create a lot of hype and anticipation only to fall flat because you turn on the Incredible Hulk next. And you can't just skip those credit scenes to try to make your own marathon. They're a Marvel staple and offer a small glimpse into the MCU beyond the heroes. The only other difference from the original release order and chronological order is where Captain America: The First Avenger falls on the list. Despite being released in 2011, 3 years after the franchise had started, Steve Rogers' origins is the start of it all. Without Steve and the Super Soldier Serum, a lot of the events in the MCU would have happened differently. There'd be no Hulk, no Civil War. Who knows if the Avengers would have even been able to defeat Loki if Captain America wasn't Steve Rogers. Plus, by starting your marathon with Captain America: The First Avenger, you get a lot more context for the Incredible Hulk. Like we said, the Hulk might not have existed without Captain America. Bruce Banner was hired to recreate the Super Soldier Serum used on Steve, which led to his own accident. Knowing about the serum ahead of time and seeing what they wanted Banner to make helps explain the opening of the Incredible Hulk and the intentions of its characters. It also helps set up the world, showing the difference between the MCU and our own by introducing things like the serum and super soldiers. So even though Steve's technically one of the last to join the Avengers team before the group takes on Loki, an early watch of Captain America: The First Avenger is definitely a good idea. After watching Thor and meeting the final characters for this arc, you can finally watch The Avengers and see the world get saved. With the first wave of movies done, you can move on to the next wave, one that's a lot longer than this introduction and spans most of the movies. Since most of the key characters were already introduced and interacting with each other, the MCU's release order took on a more linear path with their releases. Iron Man 3, Thor: The Dark World, and Captain America: Winter Soldier all take place before Avengers: Age of Ultron, so each character would have their own path to go down. Afterwards, all of the other characters who play a part in Captain America: Civil War get introduced in their own films. Well, almost all the characters. Tom Holland's Spider-Man never got his own origin movie. His first appearance was set in Civil War since the team said that they wanted to focus on showing people things that they had never seen before. Which makes sense, seeing how many times Spider's origins have been told in recent years. But considering he was apparently all over YouTube before Stark recruited him to fight Captain America, wouldn't a small YouTube series be a cool way to show us the MCU Peter figuring out his powers? Sort of like an origin story that isn't an origin story? Spidey aside, even after the heroes go through the events of Civil War, the movies are basically released in chronological order, each event unfolding and preparing for the most ambitious crossover in film history. Of course, not all of the movies are clear about when they happen. Even though we know that Black Widow is set to be released in May 2021, it's not clear where exactly it will fall on the timeline. Sure, it has to happen before Avengers Endgame and sometime after Captain America Civil War, but when? Is it before the events of Doctor Strange, or before Spider-Man Homecoming? Or will Marvel pull an amazing plot twist and have it take place at some crazy, unexpected point in the timeline? Unfortunately, we won't be able to say for sure until it makes its debut on the big screen. But we do know that wherever it falls in the timeline, it's gonna be amazing. There's also the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, with Quill and his friends spending their time exploring space rather than Earth. It's hard to tell when their adventures happen. The only way to really place the events is to consider the end credit scene of other movies. Avengers Age of Ultron has Thanos making an appearance at the very end, meaning that at the very least, the first Guardians of the Galaxy takes place prior to that movie. So on the timeline, it's a good idea to place Guardians of the Galaxy between Captain America the Winter Soldier and Avengers Age of Ultron. If not, then the threat of Thanos and his connection to the story wouldn't make any sense. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, on the other hand, is a little harder to place. The only thing clear about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2's placement on the timeline is that it should be watched before Infinity War, and that's it. But since the characters are so important to Infinity War, it would be a good idea to watch it before Thor Ragnarok. Speaking of Thor, Thor Ragnarok happens around the same time as Black Panther in the timeline, but it's unclear which one actually comes first or even which one should be watched first. It definitely doesn't help that Wakanda is designed to be isolated and that Thor Ragnarok only has a few scenes in New York City. With both movies taking place so far away from each other, there aren't any hints to prove which should come first. That's why the final part of this watch order relies on the second Guardians movie. First, watch Black Panther, then Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and finally Thor Ragnarok. With Thor Ragnarok's mid-credit scene, showing Thor and Loki in space, coming across an alien spaceship and Thor meeting up with Quill's team at the start of Infinity War, it's important for the movies to be watched one after another. By watching Black Panther first, you won't have to worry about interrupting the two with another movie. Meanwhile, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 would have to come before Thor Ragnarok. After all, the end credit scenes in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 are more comedic, while the previously mentioned Thor's ones are plot-centric. It wouldn't make sense to watch Thor Ragnarok before Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. With all this in mind, the second wave's watch list becomes Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers Age of Ultron, Ant-Man, Captain America Civil War, Spider-Man Homecoming, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and then Thor Ragnarok. Whew, got all that? But even with all those movies, it's not quite time to start Infinity War and Endgame just yet. There's still one more movie that needs to be watched to be able to understand all the events that will occur in both movies. Ant-Man doesn't appear in Infinity War, and for a good reason. Not only is Scott Lang still technically in house arrest at the time of the Infinity War, he's busy having an adventure of his own. During Ant-Man and the Wasp, the war threatening the world is set on the back burner so that Scott can help save Janet Van Dyne. In fact, the events of Infinity War and Thanos' plan really only comes up in the post-credit scene, when they're affected by the snap. By waiting to dive into Infinity War and Endgame and watching Ant-Man and the Wasp first, you can see how the events looked to the general public. After all, for them, the snap was a sudden surprise, just like it was for Scott. Now, you might be thinking, won't that spoil the end of Infinity War for new viewers? And yeah, it would. That's why when it was originally released, Ant-Man and the Wasp came out between the two movies. But let's be real, who doesn't already know the ending of Infinity War at this point? Not only is the movie considered groundbreaking, specifically because of the way it built up confidence in each fight and then tore it all down so quickly at the end with each battle, but the "I don't feel so good" scene became a huge meme. It was all over the internet, making it nearly impossible to miss. Plus, if you're watching this video looking for a chronological order of how to watch the Marvel movies, then yeah, you already know the ending. So, seeing the snap occur in a different movie first won't actually destroy the ending in Infinity War. The loss of our favorite characters will still be tragic, the amazing fights will still occur, and the sense of dread in the face of such a large foe will still be there. Even with the ending spoiled, it's still an amazing movie. And really, do you want to take a break between Infinity War and Endgame to watch another movie? And no offense to Scott Lang and Ant-Man, because I love Scott Lang and Ant-Man, but do you really want to take a break for Infinity War and Endgame for Ant-Man? Or do you want to be able to dive right into the finale? You can't just skip Ant-Man and the Wasp, since Scott being stuck in the quantum realm and the Pym's van is a key part of Endgame. It only makes sense to go from Thor Ragnarok to Ant-Man and the Wasp before going through Infinity War and Endgame. That way you have all the information you need to understand Endgame, without having to wait for Scott's adventure to come to an end, allowing you to enjoy Ant-Man and the Wasp without sitting there mentally screaming about what just happened. From there, we can see the aftermath of Endgame from the only remaining movies, Spider-Man Far From Home and the upcoming Spider-Man No Way Home, which is set to release on December 17th, 2021, and maybe set up for the next chapter that Marvel is planning to go down. I mean, sure, you also have every single Marvel TV show that's coming out, and that's going to change the order a bit, but it depends on how much you want to invest in WandaVision or not. And if you haven't watched WandaVision yet, what are you doing? Go watch that right now! We'll wait, go watch that literally right this second. Anyways, now that spoilers aren't a threat and the full scope of the movies are clear, the order that the movies were originally released in isn't the only way to watch the movies. Instead, we can get a better understanding of the characters and experience the crazy world they lived in, just like anyone else from that world would. We can see how the world grew, the science evolved, and the impact that the heroes had on the MCU. Honestly, it's worth it to watch it in chronological order just to see how different things are. I highly recommend it. It can be a little crazy and hard to keep organized, with space travel and even other realms involved, but thankfully those post-credit scenes that Marvel loves to tease people with works as the best tool to set up the timeline, so thanks post-credit scenes for all you do.